Alright, so in this video I've been asked by a few people to talk about my laser setup and how I program some of the laser jobs that I do. And so I thought I'd show you first in Aspire how I program the laser, and then on the CNC machine how I set it up and get the job burnt. So let's create a new file. We'll just create something simple. Let's say 5 inches by 2 inches, just to give us maybe some text to burn. And then we can draw some text. We'll say order of hobbies. Oops, gotta be careful. Stay on the text. Of course, you pick a font, make it whatever size you want. It's just for an example anyway, so it's not a big deal. I'll keep it in the lower left though, like that. Alright, so the way I do the laser job is as a fill. So I'm going to pick the pocket toolpath, and then I've set up a tool called laser, and if we look at the stats on the tool, I say that it's 0.005 inches in diameter, which I'm not really sure what the laser diameter is at its finest focus. So this is just a number kind of arbitrary for me that I use to work on this step over. The important number really is the step over here. So it's going to step over 0.003, and that's 60% of the diameter. And so whatever numbers you use to get the best results for you is what you have to do. And so I did a job where I had like 4 or 5 different settings to see what kind of step over that I really liked. And this 0.003 makes a really nice solid burn on most materials. So you may want to play around with these numbers, not the pass step, but the diameter and the step over percentage. The feed rate, again, 60% or 60 inches per minute is what I've found to be a good starting point. Sometimes that's too fast and I slow it down at the machine, and sometimes it's too slow depending on the material. So you have to be flexible with what you actually burn at. And so depending on the material that you burn or that you're cutting or that you're engraving, you're going to change these numbers. So if I know I'm going to cut these letters out of plywood, let's say, and I wanted to actually cut them out, I would slow my feed rate way down, because you're only going to scratch the surface at 60 inches per minute. And if I'm burning like I'm doing now, like the pocket tool path, I may want to speed this up, because if it burns too long in one area, then everything around it burns and you just end up with this big charred mess. But point is, you kind of have to play around with the numbers. And so these are the numbers that I like as a starting point. When I get to the machine and I start this, I may bump up the speed up or down. Also done several times where the step over is too much. The wood is really soft, like if I go and I turn around and make this out of pine, then 0.003 is a bit too much. It burns too deep on the softer woods. So I would come back to Aspire and I would bump this up, because there's no way to change the step over at the machine. You can change the feed rate, but you can't change the step over. So what I could do is I could say, I could call this laser, I'll call it dense, and I'll save, apply that. And then I'll copy this, and I'll call this laser. Maybe I'll just leave it laser. And then I'll change the step over to, actually no, we need to go up to, let's say, 0.5. And so the reason why you would want to do this is with the dense setting at 0.003, some jobs are going to be very, very long to cut out. If you had something that, say, you were going to do a giant plaque that was 12 inches and it's mostly laser burned or it's mostly full, it would take hours, right? And so these lasers that I get from China or wherever you buy them, they're not designed to burn for hours at a time. So you'll burn it out if you burn for that long. But for this little job, we'll go with the dense so we can compare the differences in time. Okay, so anyway, that's my tool setup for the laser. The pass depth doesn't matter because we're actually not going to be going down. Now, if you were trying to cut out letters, it's possible that you would want the machine to go down. You want that laser focus to be going down with the cut. But I have been unsuccessful in figuring out exactly what to do with that, because I don't know really, depending on the wood and depending on what you're cutting, how deep that laser actually cuts. So that's something I haven't quite figured out. And when I do want to cut something out, I just make several passes at it until it's cut out. And that's a topic for another video. So in this one, we're doing the laser burn, the laser fill, and I'll show you exactly what that means. So anyway, that's the tool. Now on the cut depth, I only go 0.005 because I don't want it doing more than one pass on this particular job, because I'm going to fill in these letters. We don't need a clearance tool. You can choose how you want your pocket. I prefer the raster. I prefer 0 degrees just because I like it going back and forth. It gives it that laser burned look. If you see any of the lines, most of your laser stuff is done horizontally. You could do a 45 degree or whatever you really want. Depends on what you like to see. So I like 0 degrees, no ramps. And we can just call this, we can actually leave it pocket, and I'll say calculate. And you can see, if we zoom in, it's basically going back and forth, stepping over 0.005, so it'll be burning, 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 burning. And that's basically the gist of it. I mean, that's like the entire thing. You can do a preview, but you don't really see much. I mean, you don't really see how it's really going to look. I guess you could do a toolpath color and pick black. Maybe that'll give you an idea of what it might look like. You can also slow it way down, and you can see how it's filling it from the bottom up, very similar to the way a laser machine would, but the big CO2 lasers, they generally go all the way across, turning on and off the laser, all the way across, all the way back, all the way across, all the way back. And so this is very similar to that. It's just it stays inside the letter and does a pocket instead. All right, so the next component that's very important is when you save the toolpath, your post processor has to have no Z movement in it. So if I can't really show you the post processor, but this is one that I downloaded off the internet, and I will find it and put a link in the description to this post processor. But basically, if you looked at the post processor code, they've taken out any Z movements. So that way, when you set up your laser to the exact height that you need it, and I'll show you that when we get to the machine, it doesn't move up or down. Take the laser out of focus. So this is really important, that you have a post processor that doesn't have any Z movement. And so we can save this toolpath. I'll just put it on the desktop for now. We'll call this logo text laser. And if we look at this, not that one. You can see there's X, XY, 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 XY. There's no Z's, right? Look for Z, find, no, there's no Z movement in this entire file. And that's what you want. So I'm going to take this to the machine, get this copied on a memory stick. We'll get that to the machine, and then I'll show you guys my laser setup, air assist that I've added to the machine for laser stuff, and then we'll actually burn this on a piece of wood so that you can see it. All right, so that's it, and I'll see you in a minute on the machine.
All right, so here we are at the machine, and the way I've got my laser set up is I've got the laser module that I got off of either eBay or Amazon. This one's supposed to be 15 watt pulse, 7 watt continuous, and so what that means really is that you get about 7 watts of cutting out of this. And then I've mounted on just a little L bracket so that I can actually clamp this in my dust collector hole. So let me clamp this on here, and then I'll zoom in on that. Just clamped on. All right. Like this. And then I have my wires run along with all my other wires. Give myself a little bit of slack here. I can plug those in. Now, the wiring in Mach 3 for this, I've just got some couple of the pins that are for output, and I've got those wired into here. So I've got power coming in through here, and then the output comes into here so that it can turn it on with when the spindle says turn on, it turns on. And I will dive into that a little deeper in another video. I'll actually show you how it's wired and how I set up in Mach 3 on how to get that set up. But for now, we're just going to show you the mounting of it. Okay, my air assist, I also just clamp. And I just clamp it with the nozzle sticking out. And then I'll point this to where the laser is going to be burning. All right, so now we need to hook up air. Make sure my air is on. Make sure it's locked in good. All right, so now this came with a little lever so you can turn the air on at whatever flow you really want, what you need. All right, so when we need a piece of wood, I'll just use this piece here. And now I don't really need clamps or anything. I mean, it's not going to touch it, but if I go to blow air on it and it moves, then the job will be ruined. So I usually lightly clamp, just so that it doesn't slide. Right, so even that, right, would be ruined. So I'll clamp it a little bit more. Sometimes I'll use my bricks, and I just set my brick on it, and that'll hold it down. All right, so next we need to zero the laser at the proper focal length. All right, so this is the exact focal distance that you're supposed to set that laser to. So what you do is put this underneath, and then you move it down until it's exactly this height. If you can see this. Alright, so you can see so we're getting close. That is perfect. So then I set the Z to 0, and as I mentioned before, the program won't have any Z movement, so it will stay this height the whole time. I'll also go ahead and move my air so that it's not riding on the wood, and then I'll Z X and Y. Zoom out a little bit. My keyboard over here. And at 0, 0, I will load my program. Put on my safety glasses. You can see this. Get this to where. Actually, that's probably pretty good. And then we start the job. Like I said, safety glasses on. And Alt-R. I turn on my air. So, and I'll show you when it's done. When I didn't have the air, you can see how it burned around the edge that I'll have to sand. Let's see if I can get a close-up shot. So you can see the H where it's burned. Let's run into the camera. Because I didn't have the air on. And this is real time. About 2 minutes, about over a third of the way done. This is a pretty small logo though. Alright, so that is it. Disconnect the air. Disconnect this. We can actually go up. I like to disconnect my laser just so that it's not on. Alright, hopefully. So you can see the laser. It's kind of small, but this is what we were just going for a test. So you can see down here where it burned the H, but the rest looks actually pretty clean. A couple hits of the sandpaper and that should be fine. And that's it. That's how I laser engrave stuff.